Hello and welcome back to the Comic Literate podcast, the podcast that does deep dives into the best of comic books, graphic novels, mangas, penny dreadfuls, webcomics, newspaper comics, essentially any single-frame illustrations where the characters use bubbles to talk or think. I am your host, the soon-to-be-known as Comic Stan, and with me as always is my harmonious co-host, it's Jamie.
Harmonious.
You tell I was running out of breath there for a second?
Yeah, I could, yeah. It's
like, if I just get to the harmonious and then it's all good, and I could just blurt out the last part.
What? Harmonious kind of feels like you've scraped through the bottom of the barrel and I'm just getting the remnants of the pub floor tiles.
So it's not quite, I mean, that's a pretty harsh, that's a harsh feeling on the word harmonious. Bloody harmonious catching strays here. But what it is I'm trying to exhaust an area before I move on to the next in terms of the thesaurus. Because the thing I've realized is, in doing this bit that I've now committed to for some reason, that no one would hold against me if I stopped doing, except myself.
And me.
And you, obviously.
I would be most
If one week I was just like, and it's Jamie. It's like, what have I done?
I'd want something.
Yeah. You're right.
I think the irony is, of course, that I'm not harmonious at all. I'm quite a discordant creature.
I'd say harmonious was more just kind of like generally agreeable and nice. Like that was kind of, I didn't, because I thought that was, according to the definition, that I cannot recall word for word, but I was surprised it was more of just a positivity thing rather than a calmness, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But what it is I'm just going through each area, trying to exhaust as many good options before I move on. And the way you move on in this thing that I'm doing is you pick one of the words that is on the first page, and that takes you to a new set of words, and you follow the rabbit hole there. So I'm like, before I go too deep,
are you explaining how a thesaurus works to me?
Well, you're a librarian. I didn't know if thesaurus comes under that umbrella or not.
Well, I have an English degree.
Well, if anything, I shouldn't need to explain this to you then. You seem to have a look on your face that said, please explain to me how a thesaurus works. I was like, all right,
I've never seen a thesaurus. What I think you should do now is get a rhyming dictionary.
How many words rhyme with Jamie?
No, just start finding words that rhyme with words that mean chatty.
Okay. It's like a Cockney rhyming slang of positive descriptions.
Oh, if you could make one up for every week, that would be marvelous.
I tell you what, once I run out of just unusual words or like lesser known words, then I'll get to that point. Once it doesn't seem like I'm using word a day toilet paper, then I'll start going into rhyming.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
So we are back at it again, back in the house with another episode, which we are going to be diving into a main topic, which is a specific limited issue comic. Do we want to hit up our corners first?
No.
You've not read anything?
No.
Not even this week, I've got the back of my shampoo bottle. It was very interesting.
Well, I've been busy, and so I've been giving myself a bedtime story out of an edition of Oscar Wilde's children's stories.
I would count that. I mean, if you want to get into that at all.
Yeah, it's been nice. I read the Greedy Giant, about a giant who steals a football from some children.
I was going to say, it was the giant. For a second, I was going to get into, is the giant only considered greedy because proportionately what they eat is much more. So we're like, bloody hell, giant, you're greedy.
You ate two pigs today.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm a fucking giant. Like, what do you want from me?
They're sausage-sized pigs.
Yeah, I'm literally a giant.
I think what's fun about Oscar Wilde's children's stories is that they mostly read like Grimm's Brothers stories. But then every once in a while, there'll be a reference to the society with which Oscar Wilde was both very charmed and also quite disdainful of.
Right.
And so, he was talking about, in The Happy Prince, there's a bird, a swallow who falls in love with a wren. And the other swallows say, oh, but, she's from a terrible family. She has no society. And it's so painfully Victorian and Wildinian.
I would say, how dare they? They don't even own a turncoat. Or something.
This is it, yeah, absolutely. And it's a very like Wildinian concern.
You couldn't even ride a penny farthing. Victorian era bullying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Class-based bullying, obviously.
Exactly, this is it, isn't it? But yeah, no, it's been lovely. I mean, it's basically grown-up bedtime stories.
I mean, the way I like to think of it, any bedtime story is a grown-up bedtime story if you're not a pussy about it, you know?
Yeah.
It's like when there's a bit I'm going to come back to later, but it's when some people describe like, oh, this cartoon is like for adults, or like, oh, this comic book is like, it's like written for adults, or whatever. And it's like the medium is not exclusively for kids.
Yeah.
But it's developed that way because you could do more fantastical things with cartoon and comic and animation. So it's like, well, we'll make like, you know, the Teletubbies. It's either grown men in suits or we make a cartoon. Like it's one of the either. And obviously cartoons were cheaper because you didn't have to make grown suits and make magic happen and, you know, magic roundabout with a guy who's got half a spring for legs and stuff.
Zebedee,
exactly. So that I think created the false misconception that these mediums were exclusively for children. And then now you've got like, even these days, you've got like, obviously for the last 20 years, we've had like South Park and to a degree The Simpsons and Family Guy and all that. People like, oh, it's like adult animation. It's like, can we find that middle ground where it's not either for kids or explicitly adult? Like there is you can put anything in between there. And
Pixar films.
Well, that or like a good example I heard the other day because I saw this topic we discussed was like Bob's Burgers. Bob's Burgers is a quite adult humor, not because it's sexual or violent, but because it's the mundane banality of everyday life, and it's the children interacting with that as like. They're like suspiciously adult for their age.
Yeah.
And but then they'll bring it back by being kids as well. So
have you seen Steven Universe?
No, it's on my list. Apparently, I know it's one of the best. It's generally, I've heard all about it being one of the best animations of all time, and I need to watch it.
It's so good. It's one that I watched exclusively as an adult, but I was recommended it by like a 14-year-old. And he saw something really charming in it, and I saw something really charming in it that was completely different. And the music, man. One of the characters is played by a British musician whose name I can't remember. Estelle.
Right.
Estelle plays one of the characters.
I'm going to pretend I know who Estelle is.
American boy.
Okay, yeah, sure.
She doesn't like his baggy jeans, but she's going to like what's underneath them.
I always remember this is the most niche reference that
I know exactly what you're going to talk about.
East Anglian boy. That 99.9% of the world do not know what that's referenced to.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, Estelle's in it, and there's a song about anxiety called "It Was Just a Thought," and Estelle sings it, and it is properly good. Also, Better Than You or Stronger Than You. Really powerful piece of music sung by Estelle. Really fucking cool. I fucking hope it's Estelle. Can you check for me? Can you just Google Steven because I've not got a device in front of me.
Yep, hang on. Let me just do the old quick Google
break.
If you just entertain, fill the void. Tell us more about Steven Universe. What's good about it?
Yeah, so it's so Steven is like a young boy, a ukulele playing happy-go-lucky child.
Okay, it is Estelle.
It is Estelle. Yeah. But it transpires that his mum was an alien from a planet where they were all gems. And so they are gems, but their corporeal form is just a projection.
Right.
And so he is half gem, half human, the only one of his kind. And him and 3 of his mum's former acolytes are trying to save the world from a kind of shadowy threat that they haven't quite established yet. But it just hits on so many big topics in really charming, clever ways. And there's these really wonderful fleshed out characters, but we only see characters when we need them. And the characters all have amazing arcs and there's a lot of growth. It's really good.
Yeah, no, it's on my list, and as soon as I watch it, that will be my watched thing corner for the week.
Yeah,
and we'll have a chill. There's probably a comic about it. We could probably do a comic about it.
Yeah, I imagine somebody's done one.
Interesting side note. Do you want to know what Estelle's middle name is?
No,
it's 100%. It's Fanta.
Estelle Fanta.
Estelle Fanta Soiree. Apparently they were half and half. It was either going to be that or Tango.
Did they not get the rights to Tango?
I think Fanta were paying more for the advertising spot. They were like, this kid's going to be famous. We want the middle name rights exclusively.
You know what Fanta is, don't you?
I do. Drink. That's all I know it as.
It's Nazi Coke.
What? Okay, yeah. No, I thought you meant a different thing. I was like, does he mean Nazi cocaine? And then I clicked like, nope, I have heard this story before. I know what this is. This was they wouldn't Coke, or someone wouldn't allow Coke, so they had to make a new drink to be able to sell in Nazi Germany, right?
So Yeah, there were factories producing Coca-Cola
Right.
in Germany in the 30s. And then as the Nazis became more powerful, they obviously didn't want big American businesses operating within German borders, and the Americans wanted no fucking part in it.
Right.
And so there was a kind of mutual agreement that Coca-Cola wouldn't be in Germany anymore. But they didn't have the recipe. And so they made what they could make, which was an orange-flavoured syrup, and that became Fanta. So Fanta, it's not Nazi Coke, but it was one of those that kind of, it came out of Nazi Germany.
Yeah, its creation was because of the existence of the Nazis, and not in a good way.
Fanta, Hugo Boss, and the Volkswagen Beetle. I have a fun Volkswagen Beetle fact as well.
Okay, go ahead.
There is a 6-year crossover where both the original Beetle and the new Beetle were in production at the same time.
And that was during the 40s?
Nope.
Huh?
When I say the new Beetle, I mean the one that we remember, like the ones that would still be driving around on the roads today.
As in Herbie the Beetle, the film with Lindsay Lohan, that Beetle?
Yeah.
Right.
So the new Bug went into production in 97, and the original Beetle, like rear-engined, air-cooled, original Herbie, didn't come out of production until 2003.
But those last production years were probably like we make one a year, like that.
No,
fair enough.
It was in full-scale production in Mexico.
Wow, fair enough.
Volkswagen had a Mexican factory. The very last run was only 3,000, but it was in production pretty consistently between the 1930s when they came up with it and 2003.
Well, you did say it was going to be a fun fact, and we will put that to review, and if it's not, we will cut it out of the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
It'll just be, do you want to hear a fun fact? And then it's just me recording of going, it was not fun, so it was removed.
What's going to be really funny is when my partner listens to the podcast, because she'll be like, Jamie, you
told that story again.
You messaged me about it that day. I always knew that the Bug came out of production really late, but I was just sat there working today and I was like, wait a minute. There was a crossover, and it blew my mind, so I thought you might want to hear about it.
I also love having the kind of job where you suddenly have a thought and you go, this needs urgent research. I can't do anything until I've moved on, until I've found out the truth.
I mean, it was 2 Google searches, you know? Like, it wasn't a lot of effort.
Yeah, of course, no. My corner, what was I going to say? Quickly, the reverse trade offer, if I watch Steven Universe, you need to watch Gravity Falls, because that's compared they're like 1-on-1 in terms of great animations.
Gravity Falls is really good.
Yeah, have you seen it already?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, then you can watch it again while I watch Steven Universe or something. For my moving pictures corner, faster than comics, yada yada, all that. I mentioned previously about watching that show Shrinking, the one with Jason Segel.
Yeah,
I've given up on that. It got way too sitcom-y. Like,
did it spoil itself for you?
I told you there was 2 elements. One I liked and one I didn't. I liked the element of the uncomfortable truth, like people dealing with shit and maybe not having the best, effects on their lives and stuff. Yeah. And then the other aspect, which I didn't like, was the sitcom-y, everyone's chums and quippiness, that kind of thing, because that's everywhere. Like, I don't there's enough of that on TV. I just don't need more. I can't be asked with a show that indulges that as well. At least in not a great way. Basically, it got to a point where they were just all the characters were friends now when they had no reason to be, and they're all hanging out together. And I was like, I'm done with this. So I started a new series, which is a fairly recently come out series called Poker Face. It stars Natasha Lyonne. Have you also seen it?
I'm restraining myself.
You can't say that and then not say what you're restraining yourself against.
Just gratuitous Lady Gaga quotes.
Okay. I mean, you can sing it if you want.
Poker Face.
There you go. You could have just got out of your system and I'll just cut out later.
Yeah, please do.
Or I'll leave it, whichever. But it's an interesting one. It's a murder mystery show. It's actually written and directed. I think most episodes of one episode at least has been directed by Rian Johnson, famed most recently for Glass Onion and Knives Out.
Yeah.
It's a murder mystery, and it kind of explains why, I'm pretty sure it's Natasha Lyonne? Leon?
Don't look at me.
From American Pie originally, and then Orange is the New Black more recently.
Yeah.
But she was, there was a bit in Glass Onion near the beginning. Have you seen Glass Onion?
No.
Right. This is near the front, so it's not a spoiler as such. It's like not right near the beginning of the film. But you know the character. Have you seen Knives Out?
No.
Right. Watch those films. They're on Netflix. They're great. They're great murder mystery films. I was big into the genre before, then I kind of lost it because there wasn't really good ones, and that's kind of reinvigorated the genre a bit. But Daniel Craig plays a detective.
I've seen the trailers for them.
Benoit Blanc. There's a bit where he's playing Among Us with like 4 other detectives, or one of them's like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, because he turns out he's a basketball player, but he's also really smart. But one of the people is Natasha Lyons, and people are like, oh, she's just one of the people, whatever. Now she's in this show, also written and directed by Rian Johnson. It's like, wait, is that her character? Is this a crossover from the films to the TV show? But it's interesting. She plays a character who basically has the ability to tell whenever anyone's lying.
Well, that would be really useful for a detective.
Well, she's not a detective, so she's just a normal person. But she has this thing, and she says it's not magical or anything. She can't tell the truth or anything. It's just she only can tell when someone's intentionally lying, and she just has this intuition. That's 100% right all the time. But the problem is she keeps coming across people who get murdered, and then I've only seen 2 episodes.
Is it a little bit?
So I think it's like, what's the one the one in this little English village, the murders.
Midsummer Murders.
Is it Midsummer Murders? It's like, how are all these murders happening in this little village of 100 people?
I was thinking Jonathan Creek.
Yeah, that's a bit, but then he goes around a bit, doesn't he? Like, he doesn't come across murders. Did he get, like, enlisted or whatever? Or?
He's got his journalist buddy.
That's it, and the journalist investigates. And it's like, yeah. But she just comes across murders. But, like...
really unfortunate life.
Apparently, yeah. But then she... solves it. I've only seen 2 episodes, but they've been really good. It's got a kind of 90s, late 90s, early 90s TV aesthetic, like almost like a graininess where it looks like a film. It's interesting because the way they do it differently as well is this. If anyone knows the Columbo reference, they show the murder happening at the beginning. So it's not a who's done it as such. You know who's done it, but you see the evolution of her working out who's done it and then having to prove it. So it's you see the secret and you see her slowly working it out and then having to eliminate like possibilities, work out what the lie is and prove it and stuff. But it's really good. I've enjoyed the 2 episodes. I think she's going to keep stumbling upon murders far more than the average person does.
Imagine if she didn't.
Well, then but then you could space them in between. Like something happens in the beginning of the first at the end of the first episode that links to it shows it's quite soon after in the second episode. So if it'd been like undisclosed amount of time, I'd be like, fair enough. She'd come across another murder. It just happens over time. It's been like a week. Like it's another murder in a week. Like that's the problem. And she interacts with the people before they get murdered. So like you are literally speaking to people and then they randomly get murdered. I'd be suspicious of myself. Like maybe I'm doing it.
Is it like one of those murder TV shows where there is a murder per episode?
Yeah, it's a weekly thing for sure. But it doesn't feel like a weekly thing because it's at least the first 2 have such different situations.
Yeah.
It's a different murder each week, but they've just been done very well. You know there's a murder that's about to happen, but you don't know of the characters who it's going to be until like 10 minutes in. Right. So it takes the time for you to like or not like or just get to know some characters, and then one of them murders another. But it also plays with the who's going to murder who, so you get a little bit of that as well. But it's highly recommend. It's great show. If you like a murder mystery, it's a bit different from the normal one where we've always had this, like, especially CSI and all those, where it's like, who's the murderer going to be and stuff. So it's an interesting difference, which again harkens back to Columbo, which I've never seen, but I just know that is the style, and that's from like the 80s, I think, or 90s. Yeah. So it's reinvigorating the genre with an old trope and bringing it back.
I got really into old CSI when I was in New York.
Old CSI?
Well, because we had a TV in the room, and we wouldn't sit in the room and watch TV. But when we got back to the room, we would turn the TV on, and we were watching American broadcast television.
Right.
Which is mostly adverts about anal leakage. It is wild.
Is it?
Highly recommend.
Does it at least show you the positives of the medicines that cause the side effect of the anal leakage?
Yeah, but the adverts were mostly pharmaceutical. And every single one was like 20 seconds bestowing the virtues of this medication. And then they would start listing the side effects, and it'd be like, here's a medication to reduce blackheads, may cause your anus to dissolve. Well, it was wild. So much fun.
The most depressing ones of those, which are all too real, are the ones that are antidepressants. Like, side effects may include suicide. It's like, that doesn't help.
That's sertraline, isn't it? That's one of the main antidepressants that people use.
But the way you described it was like, take this drug. The side effect is anal leakage, but it might have a positive effect. It's like, well, I'm sold.
That's pretty much the way the adverts go.
They at least do it the other way around. They're like, here's the problem, here's the solution, here's the side effect, not the reverse.
But I think one of them was an acne medication that could cause like really severe internal hemorrhaging. So I'll just take the spots, bruv.
I mean, a lot of people won't in today's day and age of modern beauty standards and stuff.
You can still put a nice post on Instagram with your fucking spleen dissolving. Yeah,
I will. A lot of people will take the method of, I'll take internal damage to look good on the outside. And a lot of those people are already dead on the inside anyway. So,
Ryan. On that note, I think
we haven't got any attractive listeners. Come on. No one who's satisfied with life is listening to this.
If you are an attractive listener, pipe up, let us know.
Yeah, so just a Word document, no pictures or anything. Just say, I am attractive, and we'll believe you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that
we go on with it.
Yeah, that could be some self-affirmation for you.
Oh, lovely.
All right, let's get into it. Let's zoom in, or up and away, or is it a bird, is it a plane, or those kind of references, because we are doing... Because we are doing Supergirl.
Which is so upsetting because we're doing a superhero, but they don't have man in their name.
Exactly. And that would be a weird surname for just Supergirl. Like, it just...
Supergirlman.
It sounds like someone's just being dismissive of Supergirl. Like, I don't trust you unless you have a man at the end of your name or with you in the room.
Yeah.
But it's a great one we've done because what I'm especially happy about is it's our first Tom King written series.
Hey, hello, Tom.
Supergirl, the world of tomorrow, the woman of tomorrow,
the woman
of the world of tomorrow.
Yeah,
the woman of tomorrow. And it's a very interesting one because it's a fairly recent release that literally just started mid last year and just recently ended. So cutting edge of a finished limited series.
Well, I'm pretty sure when we discussed doing it, there were 7 issues.
Yep.
And then I started reading it yesterday and there were 7 issues. And then I was able to buy issue 8 today.
But I think it was an interesting timing because we didn't plan on it being so close to the last one coming out. So
no,
it worked out quite well. I also was worried we were just going to get the 7, and I was like, well, we'll do it anyway because it's still going to be good. And then when the 8th one came, I was like, brilliant, even bonus. I think it was an interesting one because it's so recent release, and it's not a typical comic of this character, which is Tom King's kind of staple. He always has different stuff. He takes a character and just does different stuff with it. His closest to the mainstream was probably his run on Batman. And even then, that was quite different. He had him and Catwoman marry and, did a lot of different stuff with that as well. But this is more his staple of Vision and Mr. Miracle, where he just I'm going to explore the character in very weird ways. I'm not that bothered about the story as I am the actual character exploration. And I think that shows in this. It has a story, but it's not, what happens in the story is not as important as the characters and their development and that kind of stuff.
I think what's most interesting is that Supergirl isn't the protagonist, really.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one because it's a commonly used trope, but I think it's used well here. It's that bystander looking at this amazing character.
Put me in mind of Holmes and Watson.
Yes, a little bit, yeah. They have a dynamic of sorts, but it does also, the age gap definitely makes it think of mentor-mentee kind of thing as well.
And that's the way that the Holmes and Watson books were originally written.
Right.
They were a retrospective from Watson's perspective. So it was Watson retrospectively talking about his experiences living with Sherlock.
Right.
And this is exactly what that is.
Well, this is a very interesting narration device, which we will get to in the end. But if we start off with if we go through chronologically, and then we're just going to say, as we go on in the episode, there's going to be more spoilers as we go on. And well,
I just kind of want to get into it.
Yeah, we'll get into it.
So, Ruthie...
Can I give some blurbs?
Oh, do you want to give a blurb?
I've actually got 2, because I got one from the Wikipedia, but it didn't really delve into the series, the actual story. So I also got the Amazon one because it wasn't on Wikipedia. Again, Wikipedia, dropping the ball here. I stick up for you all the time, and you let me down, and I'm trying. I feel like I'm the only one trying in this relationship. So I'm talking to Wikipedia. I should have made that clear without staring into your eyes while saying that.
You realise at some point Wikipedia is going to be sentient, Ryan.
Yeah, I know. And I'm going to be like, I was always there for you, but you never returned it.
When Wikipedia becomes sentient, it's going to listen to the whole of the internet and go, I'm going to find that Ryan from that podcast.
And murder him.
And no. You're going to end up in a long-term relationship with Wikipedia.
That'd be cool. Although they probably would remember everything you say. Like, you know, when you're in an argument and then later and they're like, oh, yeah, you think like that. And you're like, oh, I didn't mean that. Oh, it's just, heat of the moment, you know?
Yeah.
Or when you say, oh, I like this thing. And then you get that gift for 10 years afterwards. You know exactly.
No, that one, yeah.
Your Wikipedia entry says you like dinosaurs. Like, I've had enough of dinosaurs. There's a whole room full of them.
He's there just on a Stegosaurus armchair. I've had enough of it.
Yes.
Really spiky.
I drew the line at the chair. Do you know what a librarian's favorite dinosaur is? Thesaurus. It comes back around.
Hey.
So, the Wikipedia entry, it's a bit vaguer, but basically, under the Infinite Frontier brand, no idea what that means. I've been out of touch with DC for a bit. Kara's next series, Woman of Tomorrow, debuted in June 2021. Wow, that can't be right. That's not right. That was like 2022. Bloody Wikipedia.
Don't look at me.
I'll have to check that. But don't hold us to that date. That could be wrong. Again, I'm sorry on behalf of Wikipedia.
It's on Wikipedia. It must be right.
Someone's got to go in and change that. Or at least delete the entire entry. So, written by Tom King and penciled by Brazilian artist Bilquis Everly and Matt Lopes, the arc introduces Supergirl to new character grounds as she begins the story as a young woman celebrating her 21st birthday and helping a young alien in her quest for revenge. The mentor-mentee journey. So this is why I got the second one, because this last part isn't really like a blurb. It's just tidbit, like a little tidbit of information. The mentor-mentee journey on revenge plot, according to King, inspired by the original novel and both versions of True Grit.
Oh, okay.
Which I've not seen. It's one of those ones I hear about being good, but I haven't heard about it.
No, that makes a certain degree of
Have
sense.
you seen True Grit?
No, but I've read a script of it.
That's an odd way to... How did that happen?
Honestly, I think it was for a writing class at uni.
Okay, and that was an example of a good script, I'm guessing? Hopefully not a bad one.
Yeah, no, it was just something that It's something that I've read. It's something that I'm familiar with.
Right.
But I'm familiar with it from having read the script of it, not the novel that it was based on or having watched the film.
Well, we can take it from King. We've basically had the comic book version. So
yeah,
that's enough. So, the Amazon one, which gets a little bit more into the story, is Kara Zor-El has seen some epic adventures over the years, but now she finds her life without meaning or purpose. Here she is, a young woman who saw her planet destroyed and was sent to Earth to protect a baby cousin who ended up not needing her. What was it all for? Sounds like a sitcom thing again. Wherever she goes, people only see her through the lens of Superman's fame. Just when Supergirl thinks she's had enough, everything changes. An alien girl seeks her out for a vicious mission. Her world has been destroyed, and the bad guys responsible are still out there. She wants revenge, and if Supergirl doesn't help her, she'll do it herself, whatever the cost. Now, a Kryptonian, a dog, and an angry, heartbroken child head out into space on a journey that will shake them to their very core.
Well, that's just full of inaccuracies.
Yeah, there's a few there, yeah.
Yeah, riddled. Terrible.
You just don't like the word, or?
Pardon?
What, riddled?
Riddled with inaccuracies.
I thought you were like, I didn't like they used the word riddled, and I didn't even question. I was like, yeah, I hate it too. Like,
riddled is a word that I use a lot.
Right. You have to describe a lot of things as riddled. Normally that's a...
Fucking riddled with it, mate.
Normally it's a bad connotation. No, it's like, it's absolutely riddled with good things. Like,
yeah, so... what did you think of Ruthie?
I thought that she was more of a plot device. I think that in some instances she came across as more of a plot device, but then in other instances she did reveal character. So I suppose it was a good in the sense that she was serving both purposes. Sometimes her backstory and her kind of deeper feelings, and as they were revealed through the time, her relationship with her dad and everything, sometimes she added nice perspective to the whole story. Like it's constantly references how she's basically from like essentially a medieval planet and growing up on a farm and that kind of stuff. And to see then this superhero in space, she's got a unique perspective. And there's enough character stuff, but it's her different perspective, which becomes like a narration to the story.
So she's from a farming community. But she makes it quite clear that her dad had been to war in space. And so he had told her stories of lots of different planets and places that he'd visited during the war. And so she doesn't give us that. She doesn't give us the George of the Jungle experience, where she is a completely backwards person experiencing all of this stuff without any reference of what it would be like.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting is that what we're seeing of both of these characters is explicitly based on her memories many, many years later. And so we are seeing a idealized version of Supergirl. And we're seeing a Ruthie... We're seeing her youthful exploits through the lens of her kind of older self.
Well, it does go to lengths to try and not idolize. So the narration within the context goes to lengths to not idolize her. But obviously, at points, it can't help idolize.
Yeah.
Idealize. It does, idolize and idealize. But it does go to points where she does things that you can't help but describe as, super or heroic.
Because I would argue that she definitely idolizes her.
Yes, definitely, yeah.
Like, we're seeing, I suppose, as true a depiction that somebody could give of somebody they met, 100 years ago? Or 200 years ago. It's 200 years, isn't it?
I don't know, whatever. It's...
Well, when we get to the very end.
Do we want to go into that already? Because we know the narration is obviously past tense, so we know that she survives afterwards.
We often have this clash where it's kind of like, I feel like to be able to talk about a text, we can't be squeamish about spoiling it.
Okay. Well,
I can't, there's certain things that you can't discuss without the necessary context from the text. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I'll say at the very least, I think with a shorter text as this, as short as a number of issues as this, then I completely see your point. So should we say up top, I very much enjoyed it. But again, I'm biased because I'm a big Tom King fan. So
I have issues.
Issues with issues.
Trademarked. There are points where I think the writing's really sloppy.
Okay, well, as I said, we'll get into that exactly. Would you recommend?
Oh, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed it, but I like Supergirl.
Yes. And again, I enjoyed it because I like Tom King.
Yeah.
I think if you want, as I said, a different take on an existing character, I think this is a good example of that. It's not set in the normal world of DC superheroes, but also more specifically Kryptonian superheroes and everything. Normally they have their metropolis setting and it's all like that. Supergirl's always been a bit more in space. She's had her past about being like a Red Lantern, which was a great run previously, and things like that. It's kind of tropey, but it plays with the tropes in different ways. And I think that's as much as I can get into without spoiler. Obviously, we'll get into it more now, but I would highly recommend it on those basis. And we'll get into the whole thing now. So you had your chance. You've listened to the preamble. This is
going to be a really spoilery episode.
You've listened to us talk bollocks. And now if you want to read the comic, go out and read it. It's 8 issues altogether. So highly recommend.
It'll take you an hour.
Exactly. So the narration, as you were saying.
Yeah. So at the very end, when Supergirl goes back to Ruthie, and she talks about Clem, the prisoner's experience in prison.
Clem.
She says, he spent the first 100 years not being a very good prisoner and arguing and questioning things.
Well, so we should add the context, and this is why I always veer more towards chronological tellings. We should give the context of Clem fought and killed Ruthie's dad. That's why he was in prison by this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So they imprisoned him.
This is the revenge tale, as mentioned earlier.
But basically what I'm saying, I'm just giving a timeline, which is that he spent 100 years kind of being a not very model prisoner and then 100 years actually repenting. And so we're talking Ruthie is 200 years removed.
I think there was an extra 100 there as well.
There are
I
300
think there was
years.
a third 100 where he was then a model repenting prisoner.
A repenting prisoner. So there's 3 centuries. She's 3 centuries removed from the story she's trying to tell.
Yeah.
And so I think that brings into question the reliability of our narrator.
True.
And I don't know if you've really talked much about reliable and unreliable narrators.
I mean, we've had it a bit in Mouse, and I think, but that was a part of the text explicitly. What he included, what he left out, missing information, that kind of thing.
And again, this is a feature of the text, isn't it? Where I'm right at the start, they go to a rest stop, and somebody who has beef with Superman catches them and tries to attack Supergirl.
Yeah.
And she says, "Oh, these encounters happen so frequently, I'll stop mentioning them." And so just every couple of pages, just imagine something like this happens to us.
Yeah.
And so already she is giving us details about the narration that we don't actually get in the story.
Or that are visibly different at some parts from, so the narration, seeing the written narration and then seeing the actual action taking place.
Yeah.
Differences there, you see them as well.
And then right at the end, she says, we get 2 different versions of the ending.
Yeah.
2 distinct versions of the ending. And we see one of them in the panels, and she kind of outlines one of them through the narration. And we have to decide which version of events is true.
Well, I wasn't unsure about which was true. I was quite aware one was the story that went out to the wider DC world, and the literal story was the coming out of prison and stuff. And I thought it was really interesting what, if anything, they were trying to say, what the writer, Tom King, was trying to say about revenge. Again, if anything at all. I kind of felt like he was trying to have it both ways.
Yeah. He
was trying to have the nobler side, you don't need revenge. Revenge won't make you feel better. It's better, to not do that. And at its worst, the worst way to describe it is the killing all the henchmen, getting to the boss and going, "No, I'm above killing now," which I was worried it was going to be like.
Well, she didn't kill all the henchmen. She rooted them out and sent them retreating, didn't she?
Well, but then she crashes through the ship, and it's an age-old Superman question of like, if he's fighting an enemy and they fly through a building like a skyscraper or something, did anyone die there?
Yeah.
Like there's a thing that's interesting to me, but there's the thing with the Hulk where, again, this is Marvel, but whenever the Hulk would fight these big monsters like Abomination or robots or the leader's armies or whatever, there was a thing where there was a lot of destruction, and there was a growing thing among fans where they were like, "Oh, people must be dying in these whatever," and they retconned it later where it said the reason that people happen to not die is because Bruce Banner was influencing the Hulk in that way to be like, steering him to avoid, casualties and bystanders getting hurt and stuff like that. With Superman,
plot armor.
Yeah, well, like almost like morality armor in a way as well. Like, no one died because, this was happening.
Yeah.
But Superman doesn't have that excuse because he's like, you are Superman all the time.
Yeah.
Like, and you're flying through buildings. Did you use your X-ray vision and check? He could have. And that's the thing is, if you don't get it explicitly, are you meant to fill it with your headcanon? So again, this is that same thing where when Supergirl flies through a ship, which just happens to look like a Earth seafaring ship, but they're pirates, and I like the aesthetic.
It's literally a raiding vessel.
They're space pirates, and I like the look. But when she's flying through there and she's doing all that stuff, it's like, is anyone dying? Like, I don't know. But no one's explicitly dying, and I suppose that's the point. But
this is the thing. So at the very end of her narrative, she says that in the narrative, it becomes clear that in the version of the narrative that was published, Supergirl just beheads him there and then.
Yes, and thereby taking the brunt of this gang that have this.
Yeah,
we hunt and we rescue our own and we get revenge on our own explicitly.
But my point is that narrative is the one we've been reading throughout the whole text, and so it brings into question the version of events that we've been reading.
Yeah.
And that is the very nature of an unreliable narrator. And I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing, but I'm just establishing that we have an unreliable narrator here.
I think I implicitly, and I'm only now questioning this because you've brought it up, I implicitly think that if we're seeing it, then it's what actually happened, and the narration is, you could take it or leave it because, again, unreliable narrator.
But the narrator makes it clear that there are a lot of things that happened in the story that she's omitted.
Yeah, but then again, because
and so it brings into question whether, the fact that she makes it clear that we're not seeing in the panels everything that happened brings into question that narration, and that is the nature of an unreliable narrator.
Yeah, I suppose being more, I think because I'm having read so many comics, I think I've always just taken the action on the page, the actual illustration, the art as this has happened, unless there's an explicit, it was all a dream, or like I should have said, like what should have happened in Alan Moore's Superman run. He should have hid the tentacle monster and then revealed it was a dream. But so unless that happens, if you see it happening, then it's happened. And if it's written, you can take that as it's someone talking, so it's, again, unreliable, but just by virtue of being a person.
Yeah.
It's the difference between, by seeing the panel, you are almost a bystander who's seeing it happen, versus someone else being like, you'll never guess what just happened, and they tell you what happened, and you go, did it happen like that, though? So it's that for me, but I don't know if that is an intentional function of the work or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that you have to consider when you have a narrator.
Yeah.
Is how reliable is my narrator.
Yeah.
And I think it adds depth to the text. It's one of the things that I suppose you have to consider when you're doing a closer reading of something like this. Is we've got this narrator, they've made it clear that there are chunks of story that they have excised for certain reasons. What is the relative verisimilitude of what I'm seeing on the page at this point?
One thing I do like about the narration, and I know this kind of from the start, was and we briefly spoke about this before, is how verbose the narration is.
I think that was,
I mean, that was your word, obviously, because I wouldn't say something as wanky, but the style of the narration, I thought, on the one hand, did make the comic book narration more interesting, but because I get that because I'm comparing it to other comic book narrations, and unfortunately, a lot of them come off the same way or quite similar way. It's that troubled hero, who's being called to action and they don't want to. That trope.
Yeah.
And the narration kind of fills that in. Or it's like they're Batman already and they're just dark and brooding. So like, I thought about this. Like most Batman narrations are like, this city, filth, and I'm the only thing standing against it, and blah blah blah. Whereas this one, it was just a bit of a breath of fresh air. It was just different, and you can criticize like the character and how they talk and stuff, but I enjoyed it being a different style of narration.
Yeah,
and I think that was a part of Tom King was like, I want to do it this way because he writes a lot of comics. He's like, I'm going to do it this way.
Yeah, he's
just a change of pace.
Different. Do you know what that's called? Her manner of speaking.
Go ahead.
So I would argue it's an idiolect.
Right.
So a dialect is a manner of speaking that is shared by a group of people. So like the Norfolk dialect or the Northern dialect.
Mm-hmm.
And then an idiolect is somebody's own specific way of speaking.
Right.
And so, like when you said, verbose was your word.
Yeah.
That's a feature of my idiolect.
Yeah.
That's a feature of the way I speak. I think what's interesting is that her idiolect is, even as a younger woman, unique for somebody of her social class and standing.
Do we think it's unique to her, or do we think it's more common enough? Because we haven't heard anyone else from a planet except for the bounty hunter and Krem.
So, yeah, but the bounty hunter makes a point of it.
Right. Okay.
So when she's talking with the bounty hunter, he says, he says something to the effect of, you're awfully well spoken for a farm girl.
Right.
And so the bounty hunter identifies that her idiolect is different from the dialect he would expect her to speak based on where she's from. And so Ruthie is a very articulate character it's commented upon that she is, but it's never really established how and why that's happened.
See, without it being established how and why, I just assumed that her family or class were like that, or to an extent maybe her planet, but then obviously that was compared not to be by the other characters. But also they could have been like the lower class who don't speak like that. And that they could have been, how they speak could have been considered like lower class slang compared to her middle class speaking, even though she herself grew up on a farm. Yeah,
I mean, she's using words like olfactory, which is a beautiful word. It means smell.
Right.
But you wouldn't consider that as like part of a standard dialect for a peasant working in a rock farm.
But the thing with this kind of stuff is, even though it's a planet that's we can relate to being certain ways, we don't know what the hierarchy, the class status, we don't know any of that. So,
well, again, I think what's interesting is that the bounty hunter is surprised.
Yeah, exactly.
So based on where she's from, he's surprised that she speaks that way.
Yeah, so being that's the only thing we can take, then yeah, we can only run with that assumption based on that bit of evidence.
Yeah, I mean, we see, because I believe we see her dad speak very briefly.
So briefly, I don't even remember that. So.
There are 2 panels with him in it. I think he has a speech bubble in one of them, but he doesn't say much.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it does add interesting flavour to her narration. And I think what's nice is that it lends a certain wordiness to her narration. It makes it feel quite important.
I think a common theme of this comic and a lot of Tom King's works is taking well-used tropes and doing them a bit differently. So I don't think he's necessarily, I wouldn't go so far as like inventing the wheel or anything, but he does things either in a different way or just in he uses a trope in a fun way. And the reason I came back to that is because when we are introduced to Supergirl, she is drunk in a bar.
Yeah.
So it's very like the closest I thought of immediately was like, is it Aragon in Lord of the Rings or that kind of thing?
Good shot.
And it's like the hero who's just here to be by themselves and drink, and now they've been brought into this bloody story, and all that.
To bring it back more into this world, Logan.
Yeah, he's a common one, yeah.
That's, he's often portrayed as Professor X finding him in a bar, drunk with a big cigar in his mouth. That's often how he's pictured in his early kind of origin stories, isn't it?
And that's a big step up from when he was just found feral in the forest.
Yeah, fucking A.
It's like, at least he's wearing trousers now.
Yeah, no, I like the way she's introduced. I like Supergirl's character in general. There are a couple of specific things that I think Tom King made the wrong creative decision on.
Okay. And is this compared to previous iterations or just you didn't think worked for this version?
There's a couple things that I don't think worked. One of them is the gratuitous swearing that he bleeps out.
Right.
It bothers me.
Well, unfortunately, I think that's a requirement of DC and Marvel these days.
Don't swear then.
Unless it's, but I think they do just want to get across the characters swearing without swearing.
Bothers me so deeply.
I think you get used to it once you've read quite a bit of it. Like,
it bothers me. I think if you're going to have a character swear, they should fucking swear. I think it's really cheap where people want to make use of the power of swearing.
Right.
But not actually put it on the page. They want to have their cake and eat it.
Yeah.
Because I think that, in America they call swear words curse words.
Yeah.
Do you know what the etymology of that is?
You would curse someone with them or something? You are cursing someone?
Yeah, so swear words aren't... When you swear, it doesn't trigger the same part of your frontal cortex, your frontal lobe, as regular language does.
Right.
There's studies that would suggest our swear words live in a more primal part of our brain closer to the center.
That makes sense.
Which is why when people are encouraged to swear during painful experiences, they lessen their experience of the pain. The reason that when you stub your toe, you go, fuck.
Yeah.
And so swear words have a power to them. And I think in using them, but only using a string of punctuation, you rob them of their power. And actually, on a linguistic level, there are more powerful things you can do than imply swearing. Like, swear words have a power, and I fucking love them. Like, I swear like a sailor, but I do it with conviction. And I think that's where swearing works. You need to commit to it. And so if you're not allowed to print swear words in your comic, find another way to write your character. I don't think you should be relying on something that you're not allowed to use. I find it really jarring, and I found it took me out of the story because I was often going, which swear word did she say? I
mean, contextually, you can kind of work it out, can't you?
But I shouldn't have to.
No.
I should, if she's swearing, I should just be able to read her swearing. Either Tom King wants to write a story where Supergirl is really sweary, or he doesn't. He's done something in the middle, and I don't think it works.
I think the problem is that this is a well-worn trope of a well-worn symptom of capitalism, and that they are trying to make them as appeal to as wide audience as possible. There's obviously some things you can't do, and obviously, I assume that Tom King was in a position where he could not write it with swearing, because the fact is the only comics that from Marvel or DC that do get swearing are ones where they already have to be well known enough, guaranteed to succeed in a black label comic.
Yeah.
So like Punisher or
Deadpool,
exactly, or Wolverine. So that would kind of have to guarantee, like, if we make this character swear, we limit who we can sell this to, but it has to make the money back for us to justify.
And I do understand that, but I don't think that context is enough when you are reading a text.
Well, I say, from an artistic point, it's not justifiable at all. From a capitalistic mindset, it's the reason why, without being a justifying excuse, if that makes sense.
But my argument is that swear words are incredibly convenient for conveying irritation or frustration or anger. But if you're not allowed to swear, there are other ways of doing that, and I think it would have served the character better.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Yeah,
they were trying to portray a certain quiet hot-headedness, I suppose, with Supergirl. And I think the bleeped out swearing was just jarring. I just found it really took me out of the story.
I don't
think it was a good creative choice.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting hearing from someone who isn't used to it, because I've obviously it passes me by now. Like, I just don't see it now. So,
and I'm so used to reading novels where you need to swear, you just swear.
Yeah, and we've read comics like that as well for the same reason.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. It was my first time reading a Marvel or DC comic.
Yeah,
which wanted to make use of those words but couldn't.
Yeah,
and I was just reading it, and I was just thinking, this just comes off as infantile. It just felt like a really poor creative choice. And
also, with such an obvious workaround, which I've seen in other comics, and you've probably seen as well, with one set in any kind of other land or space, you could just make up one. You could just make one, have it contextually be the one of that planet, or that planet or that galaxy or whatever. So there's workarounds that I do see, like, this is the quickest, cheapest way to get to the end point, and they could have put a bit more effort in to make it better.
Yeah, it really took me out of the story. I just every time it happened, I was like, oh.
I think I probably had that reaction when I first read them, and as I said, now I'm just used to them now, so I don't see it. But around this time, I did find the art was particularly good in one scene, and that was the punch or the slap from the bounty hunter.
Yeah,
it was a really good depiction of like that red lines coming out from the center, like sharp, like it got across the pain of the moment, but the shock as well.
I liked the way it was drawn in general. I think.
I thought the drawing was really good. It was it reminded me quite a bit of, if I can remember the reference, it reminded me quite a bit of a Silver Surfer comic for a while ago, and that was because there's a lot of big cosmic, colorful things. It was quite a beautiful art to that, which this reminded me of as well.
Yeah, it was a desperately pretty comic book, wasn't it?
But also, again, there's like that bit with the slap was like not pretty. It was like intentionally jarring in a good way, because it got across the sudden pain and shock. And obviously, this character Ruthie has probably never experienced anything like this. For all the complaints of her family, there was never any sign of abuse or anything at all.
No, she came from a loving family. Smelly family, but a loving family.
So this could have literally been the first experience of violence. And I think the panel got across that quite well. And I like, because we both, I think we harp on writing more than art quite a bit, because we both kind of favor that aspect of the story. And, we're talking about the Blade literature. We're not an art podcast, despite me having to pick the art category when submitting the podcast a bunch of places. Like, by default, it's the only one.
Yeah.
But when there is a panel like that, I always want to think we should talk about that specifically. Like, give the artists their dues, and that was a very good one.
I think one of my favourite panels in the whole thing was Supergirl on the super horse.
Yep, that was a good one.
That was really beautiful.
I like the space dragons for, again, like the Silver Surfer thing.
Stunning, yeah, when they're on the ship.
Yeah, that was really good, yeah.
Yeah, really good.
But that scene with Supergirl being drunk, which was just after this panel, that hit all the tropes of the hero who suddenly helps out. They're also still quite drunk.
Yeah.
But the most interesting revelation was how vulnerable she is in this moment.
Yeah,
this is where we learn in her drunken ramblings, I think a clever little bit of exposition, was that she was there for a planet with a red sun, which I guess you contextualize later on that red suns make superpowered Kryptonians human, or essentially depowered. So she was still powerful compared to like normal people.
Yeah, I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I would assume that being Kryptonian, she can't get drunk unless her powers are tempered a little bit.
Well, that's the implication. I think that's one of those things that's just always been assumed. But yeah, so that's common in a lot of superhero things, especially if they have super metabolism of any kind. That the effects of drunkenness are the effects of poison, essentially. Yeah. So if you're superpowered, you don't feel the poison.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So she needs to go to somewhere specific where she's not quite as Kryptonian anymore, so she can get leathered.
Yeah. And I think it was an interesting marking of like where the characters in their life by being 21, having just turned 21.
Yeah.
And also a very 21 thing of going to a planet to get drunk.
Yeah.
That's like a very kind of like, well, I'm going to get drunk, so I'm going to go out of my way. For humans, it's like, I'm going to Ibiza for my 21st.
And we've all done that, haven't we?
Yeah.
Like, we've all been on a lad's holiday just to get pissed.
Where she needed to literally risk her life and go to a planet where she could be killed.
Yeah.
Which I suppose we all technically deal with every day. But, you know, if I was super bad, I'd be like, maybe I'll just stay in and play video games. But I thought that was an interesting way to get across what's happening and also indulge the trope of the drunken hero in the bar thing.
Yeah. And it worked. I think it worked because one of the things that we have to take into account when we talk about a female hero is that there's a gender dynamic at play throughout the whole book.
I mean, in this and any woman's title this day and age. Like,
yeah. And so there's this feeling that actually, yes, she's vulnerable because she has gone to a place where her general vulnerability is increased. But she's also in what we would traditionally perceive as a vulnerable position. And that bounty hunter acknowledged that.
Yeah.
He was like, you are just a woman on your own kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he gets a real nasty surprise when it turns out that she is Kryptonian and she is incredibly strong.
I think it's good in getting across that even when she's not superpowered, it's not even necessarily that she has the confidence of being somewhat still semi-powered, but that in all areas she has the I can't help but intervene and help someone in need. And that so it gets across the hero aspect, which can sometimes be missing from general superpowered, but also Superman story specifically, because Superman is like, well, yeah, you save the day, you're immortal, like you are invulnerable, you're man of steel. So it does add that element of like, there is a hero underneath. It's just we're lucky they are also Superman most of the time.
Do you know the one thing it really reminded me of is the scene in that basement bar in Inglourious Bastards?
That, I think I got a lot more tropey, typical ones. You know?
So, you know the moment where that German officer has been quietly sat drinking a beer in the corner?
Yeah.
And then he gets up out of the corner and reveals himself. Because she kind of catches him on his way out, doesn't she? There's no big reveal. It's just kind of, bam, I've got the sword. What are you going to do, bruv?
Hold up there, partner. Like
yeah,
that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I really liked that element of it.
I think because there was a fight scene afterwards, essentially, I went to the more stereotypical, like, John Wick. I don't know if that has a bar scene like this, but you know what I mean, where they suddenly do a fight and there's, you know, kung fu or whatever. I think I got that more than like an actual, like, I think very extremely well written scene of Inglourious Bastards, because there was no like, hold on there, and then they fight for a bit, and it's like, let's get out of here. Like Inglourious Bastards, like, you don't know where it goes, and that tension. It's an amazingly written film for obvious reasons, but I think it was a good way of getting across the information about where they were, the state Supergirl's in, while also indulging in a fun kind of like, hang on, before you go there, I'm going to just take that sword from you and, tell you to fuck off. But there was a lot of interesting stuff around the language that was used around this time, because it's the first meeting of Ruthie and Supergirl. And one of the points I noticed, this is just an example, but I think you'll agree there's like lots of beats like this. Supergirl is trying to explain things to someone who doesn't have the technology she's used to.
Yes.
She describes the spaceship as she says, I'm about to get in the ship and fly off. You need to back away because it's like a horse that kicks when it goes, but the kick is like a large area explosion and you need to be out of the area. So I thought it was good of Tom King to do this kind of like translating, not from language to language, but just meaning and context.
Cultural experience.
Culturally, yeah, exactly.
And there is some element, I suppose, having earlier on just said there wasn't much of that. There is this sense with Ruthie that she has grown up in a backwater, isn't it? Particularly when it comes to things like the soap and not washing and stuff like that. Supergirl is kind of always taking on that role as mentor, isn't she?
And this is why I was saying as well, they're describing Ruthie as a plot device and an interesting character in herself. So the story's about her family all stinking because they have one bath a month and they all have to share the water. And I think ones like that gets across Ruthie as a character and her experiences, but it also then leads to a moment of Supergirl teaching Ruthie how to wash her hands.
Yeah.
And like little things like that become plot points for later to develop Supergirl's character or to call back on a later plot point towards the end. But yeah, so I think the writing is good enough that it dual purposes things like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah.
And if you can do kind of writing that doesn't come across as overly expositional, like, oh, they're doing that because they want to get across they're a good person, or they're doing that because they want to get with sympathy for this character. I think as long as you can do that in interesting ways and very interesting ways, dual purpose, then I prefer that to simple, basic writing. So compared to other DC and Marvel comics, that's why I think I'm grading this on a curve in a way where I'm like, I really enjoyed it because I'm comparing to this. And whereas you're saying you have found issues with it because you're comparing it to like great texts and novels and stuff.
Well, yeah. So talking about the exposition, that is one of my gripes.
Yeah. And I think that's more of a symptom of the larger Marvel DC. But
because, towards the end, again, one of my favorite panels of art, one of my least favorite half issues nearly, is where she is flying up. Ruthie has sent the horse up to Supergirl on the ship. And then we get half an issue of exposition where she starts to explain Supergirl's backstory. And there is a lot of exposition.
Is that in the actual showing of the city with the radiation and everything?
Before that.
Right.
So before they actually start to show us Supergirl's backstory, we get about half to a quarter of an issue, like a solid 5 or 6 pages of just exposition. And it bothered me.
Right.
Because they were telling us and not showing us.
Yeah.
And then once he started showing us again and actually started showing us Supergirl's backstory, I was like, okay, cool. We're doing this now. I was really happy that we hadn't done this. And I was really happy that I wasn't going to take a little trip to die in Krypton. But fine, if I have to go there, I have to go there. I will read these panels. I'll look at the art.
Yeah.
But it was when Ruthie was kind of just giving us the exposition over the panels of the action that were happening within the story. And I was like, I didn't need this. This is just pure exposition. This is a piece of storytelling that you knew you needed to cram in there. You needed to find somewhere to put it, so you stuck it here in a bunch of text bubbles. And it felt authored and it felt shoehorned in.
Right.
And I just kind of looked at it and went, oh, you've done so well.
Yeah.
You've done so well not to get bogged down in her backstory, only to do it at a really critical moment, right in that last act, right when the action is happening. He kind of slowed down and started giving us Supergirl's backstory. And I was like, we've made it through 6, 7 issues at this point without the need to do this. I don't know why you felt the need to shoehorn it into the final act.
And coming back to what I say about comparing to other superhero comics, most of them would have done them on page 1, issue 1. They would have been like, bloody Bruce Wayne, they were coming out the cinema, and then the mugger came out, and the pearls and everything. Like, it would have been then.
Yeah.
So there was some restraint by leaving it till then, but I feel like, again, for me, I'm like, oh, that's normally different, and for you, it's like, why are you doing this at all? Yeah.
Well, he shoehorned it into the last act.
Yeah.
And so I felt that in terms of the pacing of the story, suddenly I am seeing one panel that I didn't even really need to see. If I see the horse leave and I see the horse arrive, I can deduce myself that the horse had a journey. And so I'm looking at this very pretty piece of art, but a piece of art that didn't need to be there, and reading through a bunch of text blocks of exposition that I don't need. Like, we know that Supergirl came from Krypton. We know that Krypton has died.
Yeah.
I think at this point, nearly 100 years into having Superman comics, we don't need to be told that Superman and Supergirl came from a dying Krypton. And so it just felt as if it really slowed that last act of the story down.
I think there was something to be gained from the actual flashbacks because they showed an aspect of the character. And the problem is, like, from your perspective, you kind of think, oh, we know this origin already. Whereas I'm aware that different versions or different
we'll do it differently. Yeah.
So you kind of have to almost have that nudge of like, by the way, it's the same, or, oh, by the way, it's different.
I still think it would have been a stronger story without it.
Yeah, no,
it slowed the last act down.
I'm just talking about the actual, when they were showing the last city and stuff, whereas you were talking about when they had the written narration about it, which I do agree was unneeded. It was unnecessary. And I think I just didn't notice it much while reading because I'm, as I said, used to that kind of trope.
Yeah.
I think it would have been interesting if they just had those panels without narration. And I do think they did get to a point where it felt like every scene where there wasn't dialogue required narration, and it might have even got to the point where they were like, I haven't got anything to say at this point, and they were like, well, you've been doing narration, so you have to keep doing it. And
it's like, because this is the thing with a comic book. If you are, a comic book is paced, I think, either by the density of the art or the density of the words on the page.
Yeah.
That's the only control you have over pacing. It's different to a novel.
Yeah.
A novel you can pace differently by just sticking with the action and reducing dialogue or writing in shorter sentences.
Yeah.
There's a lot you can do with a novel. But what they did is took a part of the story that I felt needed to move quite quickly, and where I wanted to be flicking through the pages and, absorbing this action.
Yeah. And
actually slowed that experience right down for me. And the comic book had been pretty well paced throughout the whole story. Like I'd scanned through it, I think, at the rate that I was kind of meant to.
Yeah.
And I'd really enjoyed the pacing of the story. And then suddenly at this really pivotal moment, right in the last act, it slowed right down for me. And it was because of all that exposition. It was because of that narration he was putting on top. And I don't think it needed it.
Yeah.
I think the action would have come off a little better if it'd just given it room to breathe.
I do think there was some good pacing in the actual context of the story at some points.
Yeah.
And one bit I noticed particularly was that there's a thing where when you get a really superpowered character like Supergirl or Superman or whoever, that if the antagonists aren't as superpowered, there becomes a point of how are they not already dead or captured?
Yeah.
So one way they address this is the introduction of a thing, which I'm pretty sure, I might be wrong, I don't think it was an existing thing because they explain what it is. What they call the Mordhau or the Mordo ball?
Oh, that magical thing.
Yeah. And I think that was good because usually that kind of thing is used, that usually is a bit of a Deus Ex Machina to keep the story moving, which this kind of was. But it also was explained in a way, it came across to me like the character Krem was smart and resourceful. So they were smart enough to look into what is chasing him, which he finds out is a Kryptonian, which because of Superman, is quite well known.
Incredibly well known all over the universe.
Exactly. So there's probably quite a bit of Kryptonian, black market defenses or that kind of thing. So the Mordau Ball, I think, is one of those. And they also... So this character Krem links up with a group called the Brigands, I believe, who are essentially space pirates.
Yeah.
By like the added feature that they are essentially traveling genocide, but they also take resources and money from the people they kill or the people they spare. So we work out that Krem has got the resources and the implied know-how to know, right, I've got this Kryptonian chasing after me. What can I find that will help? And it turns out it's a magic ball that can only be summoned by someone who has 1,000 careless murders, I think, or something like that.
You have to kill people but you have to do so specifically with farming their souls for that magic in mind.
Yeah, without it in mind, was it?
With it in mind. Like, you have to, it said you have to make 1,000 souls specifically for that purpose.
I thought it was the opposite, and I thought that was more telling, because I thought that came across as him just be like, well, I've got all these deaths racked up that I was like saving like airline miles. I wasn't going to use them for anything else, but I guess I'll use them for this now. But
and I agree with you, because Ruthie makes it clear that actually it was so frequent that they met people who wanted to get revenge on Superman that it would stand to reason that there would be people that Krem would have met on the way who would have spent a bit of time thinking about how to get rid of Superman and how to kill a Kryptonian.
Yeah, and again, it just made Krem at least seem like pretty smart enough to just be like, yeah, I know this is happening, so I'm going more Dro Globe, apparently is it. But he's like, I know this is happening. I've got these these deaths saved up, and I'll use them to cast Kara or Supergirl. I think she go by Kara. Is it Kara Zor-El? I think in this.
Ruthie never refers to her as Kara.
Right. So Supergirl.
Always Supergirl.
Yeah, because I thought she's had a few different names as well, just based on iterations.
Although she always refers to Superman as
Clark. Oh, Cal. Yeah, his Krypton.
She always refers to him by his Kryptonian name, which I think is interesting.
She was a child when Clark Kent, Superman, was born. Yeah. So that's the natural name she'll go by.
Is she older than Cal?
Yeah, so she's... What normally happens is, this is one of the few bits, I don't know, I didn't know much about Supergirl before reading this. This is one of the few bits I do know is that she was older when he was a baby. So he was launched as a baby from Krypton. Mm. She was a bit older, like a child. But she goes through a wormhole or something, a time-dilated wormhole. So then when she arrives at Earth, he's fully grown. So there's
she was 14.
Yes. So there's like a 30-year gap where Clark has gone from baby to adult Superman.
But she's just spent that time not in time.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
makes sense.
And that's why she's the one they mentioned earlier in the narration is she's sent to look after him as baby. She's like, hey, you need to...
Well, this is the thing, because that was in the Amazon narration. But at no point was it...
Well, it retcons it. So I think that's because in previous iterations, that's why she was sent. That was the
in this one, her dad is just trying to save her.
Yeah, well, he's
that simple.
He's trying to save the whole town, the city first. And I thought that was a good little side bit about the radiation and how it was slowly killing everyone. And they were trying to save people, and they just didn't work out. So I thought that was an interesting backstory to the state of mind and the type of person that Supergirl is. But the Mordau Ball especially was tailored to Supergirl because of the planet with the kryptonite sun.
It was a kryptonite sun that somebody had specifically made to trap Superman on.
Yeah, and I assume this was in a previous comic. I don't know if it was. It might not have been.
It's not. It's a dope.
It's a pretty good story. And apparently I do love... There is like an escalation of characters over time. Yeah. And this is how long did Superman spend on it? 45 minutes. And he said it was hell. How long have we got? 10 hours. Like,
and I love that she was like, it was 45 minutes and the League saved him. I presume she means the Justice League.
Yes, yeah. The most common League, yes.
Yeah.
But
not the League of Gentlemen.
No. But he what's this? Quartermain. So bloody Quartermain rocking up, be like, who needs help? It's like Supergirl's like, I thought you were a man. Classic League. The League of Gentlemen, Supergirl, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Yeah. League of Gentlemen's the other one, the weird British one.
Yeah.
That's not weird if you're British, but it's weird if you're not British.
Yeah, I imagine the League of Gentlemen would be really unusual to an American.
Yeah, no. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Quartermain the sexist. I thought you were a man. That's the joke. But the fact that the Mordru Ball, whatever it's called, the fact that it's tailored to the Kryptonite planet shows more research and preparation that Krem has done. So despite everything else, it gives across that Krem is resourceful.
He's clever.
He's clever, and he has the resources from murdering and genocide.
Yeah. And I think they did a really good job. So yeah, I had issues with this book, but there's a lot that I found really enjoyable in it. And I think one of the things I liked about it was the planet of
I don't think we even get a name for it.
do.
The Kryptonite planet?
No.
Oh, right.
It was the planet with the purple and the blue people and the purple and the blue hotel.
The not so subtle allegory for racism and genocide.
Yeah, and he just bunged it straight in there, and it was punchy and it was powerful, and I think it really helped to establish Supergirl's character. Again, an instance where he didn't make use of a lot of exposition. He told the story really well, and that story unfolded at a really good pace without any exposition. He did a really good job on it.
There's definitely a theme throughout the whole limited series, and that theme is the faced with the evils of, for lack of the metaphor, humanity, mankind, even though it's aliens, but faced with the evils of the rest of the world, trying to still be virtuous and good in it. And that's what Supergirl in this instance is trying to get across. And I think what's interesting comparatively to Superman is normally depicted as a beacon of hope in a kind of a real world, a mix of good and bad, like in how America views itself, like a world that's just needs a bit of a kick up the ass and will do the right thing, that kind of thing. And Superman is then the idealization to look for. And Supergirl is being thrown into these much harsher, morally corrupt places and people, and still having to be that virtuous beacon of hope.
Yeah, I agree. Can I ask you some questions?
I mean, I hope they're super DC related.
Superdog.
Crypto, yeah.
Crypto
the dog.
Crypto the dog.
Yeah.
Is that a thing?
It's an established thing. I don't know his backstory, but yeah, he's a common thing, yeah.
So is he a Kryptonian dog? Or is he super for another reason?
I don't know. I think he's probably had different backstories in the past.
Because we don't get a backstory for Crypto.
I think it's assumed that the fans would know. I did not. But also I've seen him in so many other things that I'm just like, hey, it's Crypto the dog. Like,
Does he have his own books?
He might. I know there's a league of super pets, and he's one of the big ones in it, yeah. So there's a film as well. Can we
do a Crypto the Superdog comic?
Well, once we've had some time past of no Kryptonians, then we'll do Crypto the Superdog or something similar.
Because Crypto, I mean, I think it's fun that the whole story we think that Supergirl is there to avenge Crypto. And we get right to the end and she's like, nah, Crypto's cool, mate. I did this to teach you a lesson.
That was an interesting one. Because I didn't know if I enjoyed that or not. Because I didn't know if I enjoyed the I lied to teach you a lesson. But then it turns around where she goes, yeah, I wanted to teach you like about revenge or something. And you can tell like you didn't quite think this through.
It's vague, isn't it?
Yeah. And what I appreciate about that was there's a lot of characters in all sorts of fiction where they go, I lied at the beginning because I knew exactly what would happen if I did. And now we are exact point where I planned to be. Supergirl was like, yeah, I lied to teach you a lesson about revenge or something. I don't think it's quite panned out how I thought.
Yeah.
And that actually came across more realistic. I thought that is a person who has tried to do a good thing and it's not quite panned out how they thought.
I suppose it's interesting because she's taking on this mentor role, but she's 21 years old.
This is screams a 21-year-old, regardless of gender or anything. A 21-year-old who thinks they know everything about the world. They go, that might not have been the best choice, actually.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, I saw something really interesting the other day where it was like a 25-year-old was saying, "Oh, actually, you're an 8-year-old adult." Like, we say you're 25, but actually you've been an adult for 8 years. Like, Supergirl, was living in the family home until she was 14. So even if we say that she ascended to adulthood at 14 when she arrived on Earth.
When her planet exploded.
Yeah. I mean, that's
real coming of age.
That'll age you, won't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's only been at it for 6 years and she's trying to teach somebody else life lessons. And it's like, actually, Ruthie lived a really hard life on a rock farm. I don't think we've quite drilled in that is a hard life.
Rock farm sounds especially hard.
Doesn't it? Yeah.
Just by name alone.
What? Oh, I work on a farm. Or do you raise pigs? Or is it an arable farm? Do you grow wheat? No, we make rocks.
No, it's like a pig farm, but it's pet rocks, and they glue googly eyes to rocks and sell them as
Although,
pets.
I feel like rock farm is a really weird way of saying quarry.
It's probably that thing. It's the same thing as Star Wars, where Luke Skywalker was raised on a moisture farm. It's like, what does that mean?
I mean, I suppose he lives in a desert, so a moisture farm kind of makes sense.
Yeah,
doesn't it?
water's more like gold probably in there, but
yeah.
But interesting you point out Crypto. I was more concerned about Comet the horse, because this is a character I've not experienced before.
And he's a dude, and we find out he's a dude, and then it just kind of gets swept under the rug.
So it was only when I questioned. I was reading the comic, and Comet's in there. They outraced the Mordru ball the second time, which I thought was a great bit. And I'm thinking, this horse is faster than Supergirl, because that's why she's on him racing away.
Yeah.
So that's interesting that normally the only things faster than a Kryptonian are like the Flash or something similar. And then only when I started looking up, I was like, who is this? What is this character? And then looking up, realizing, it's not. I thought it was a Pegasus for a while.
Yeah.
And it was like a weird selective blindness where only when I looked back went, oh yeah, the horse has a cape. It's a super horse.
And it doesn't have wings. Is it winged?
It's not winged.
Yeah, because originally I photoshopped wings onto it in my mind.
Yeah, I think that, again, when I thought back to it, I was like, Pegasus. And then I look back, it's like, oh, no, those aren't wings. That's a red cape.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I just gave him white wings.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's literally a Nelson Mandela effect.
Yeah.
Where we just both had it very temporarily for this one comic.
We talked about the Mandela effect recently, didn't we?
Yes.
Did we talk about it on the comic or in person?
That was in person. That time.
Did you know that there is a Mandela effect happening for the Mandela effect?
Was that never a thing?
A lot of people now think it's the Mandala effect.
Mandala?
Yeah.
It's not even a thing. It's going to become the Mandalorian effect. We'll have to pay Disney money to use it.
This is the way.
This is the way, yes. But I was interested in Comet because I did kind of think, there must be some backstory. And it was only once I finished. I finished the series. I was like, who was this Comet? Because when Comet gets shot by a kryptonite gun, and again, similar to what I said about Krem, the brigands, whatever they're called, they also are resourceful and have the money and know a Kryptonian is chasing them, so they invest in kryptonite. So exactly what Krem did.
Yeah.
Kryptonite gun, Comet takes the shot, gets in the way of the bullet, saves Supergirl, and then suddenly becomes a man. What is happening?
And we don't see the transformation. We just see her ascend.
No, we do see the transformation, because that's why I first picked it up. Yeah.
I thought we just see her ascend onto that island with him in her arms and pop him on the floor. And Ruthie's like, what's going on? And she's like, oh, he's a man. He got cursed. It's a long story. I won't get into it.
So there's that as well, that's what prompted me to think, oh, maybe I should check to see if this character has a backstory, is from somewhere else or whatever. But yeah, then there is a shot and there's a really beautiful art of the transformation. It's got a lot of color over it and stuff. And at that point, I'm like, okay, there's a lot more to this horse character. And then when she says that, at that point where she's slowly bringing down the body wrapped in the cape the horse was wearing, we think, that's when I go, okay, this is an existing character. I should probably look up what's happening. And again, because first time seeing the horse, I'm like, I should look into this. Crypto, the super dog, I've never had an inkling to be like, how is a dog superpowered? Like, it's just never come up.
So is the horse a thing?
So there's a couple of different iterations of the horse.
Right.
I actually took a post of it. So I was trying to do a bit of research for this because, again, I don't know as much. So in doing some research for this, I did come across 15 things about the new Supergirl comic article.
Yeah.
And I looked through it. Most of it was just bollocks, article creating extra stuff. But there was a few isolated points where I was like, you know what, I'll take from those.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I should name the comic, name the article or who it's by, because I just called most of it bollocks anyway. I don't know if that's the kind of the whatever the advertising that they want, but And it was a weird one as well, because one of the points that they made, and this was coming back to earlier when we were talking about animation and saying how about it's, adult and cartoon or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
One of the points it makes about it, and it says like who it's written by, who it's drawn by, where it's set, that kind of thing. And then, so the point that one of the points the article makes is it says, it has a great literary quality. And this to me was like, you say that like comics can't be well written. Like, it's 2023. Mouse came out fucking decades ago. That's considered one of the most well written pieces of fiction or writing ever.
Like we've had Watchmen and we had everything Alan Moore has ever done.
Everything Alan Moore gets mentioned for on this podcast, he has done and is there for that reason. So for them to be like, it's actually written really well. It's like, so either they're not expecting comics to be written well, which we know is bollocks, or they're not expecting DC, mainstream comics to be written well. So they're like, little funny thing about this comic, it's actually written pretty good. It's like, what are you saying? So I thought that was weird. But they do point out some of the backstory of Comet, the super horse, saying he returns. So immediately it's like, oh, he has some backstory then. But basically, there's a couple of characters that they have been, like a couple of iterations. One of which was the one that interacted with Supergirl. So we assume this might be the one, was a shape-shifting character. So we still don't know how they're super, but they were shapeshifter to a man, which we see here, and also a woman who was a gay stand-up comedian.
Sick.
So why I'm using that as an example to say there's a lot of backstory, there's a lot of issues, and that's why I think Supergirl says it's complicated. Because Tom King didn't want to get into which comic this is and why we know her.
That's a nod to the comic book, the heavy comic book fans, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
That's kind of fun.
Yes, exactly. So I appreciate it's a callback and it's vague enough that you can be like, oh, it's from this one I read. No, it's from this one I read. Like, it's all of them. Or it's none of them. Like, we don't need to know exactly.
It is Comet the Horse.
Yes, Comet the Super Horse.
And I like that he doesn't get too bogged down into where she found Comet. Because she kind of acquires him in the heat of battle. And he just fucking rocks up and saves the day. And then she leaves him to hang about with Ruthie on that island for a bit. I like the bit of interaction we get between Ruthie. I'm going to call her Ruthie.
I mean, we've been saying Ruthie, so I guess we're going for that now.
Yeah, the bit of interaction we get from Ruthie Moon and Comet is enjoyable. Like, she kind of, we get some nice character stuff. She talks about her experience with an animal that she had when she was younger and her own stubbornness. And, it's a nice character moment that we have between the two. And it kind of fills a little bit of the dead air at the start of the 7th issue, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I did like the point where Comet the Horse was about to be the Deus Ex Machina to save Supergirl from the chains and the gun. That the stakes weren't just, oh, Comet's going to go and save her. It's Comet is leaving one character to now be at the peril of possibly indulging in revenge and losing their innocence.
And Supergirl is communicating with him from where she is, telling him not to.
Yes.
And it takes some... I suppose, again, it's... We see Ruthie talk about trust and talk about animals and trust. And she plays on that and draws on that to say, come on, we trust each other. I'm not going to do anything stupid. Gets rid of them and then instantly says, well, I only lied to a horse.
Yeah, that was a good line. It's like,
I thought that was really fun.
The narration's, have you ever lied to a horse? Doesn't feel good. Fair enough. Take your word for it.
Yeah, I've not lied to many horses.
No, I've just gotten open bold-faced insults to a horse, but I'd never go as far as to lie to one, because that would be too much,
I'm pretty good buddies with a horse.
Really? What's his name?
He's called Fox.
Really?
Yeah, he's at Red Wings.
Do you know a fox called Horse?
No, I don't.
Well, what's the point then? What are we doing here? I do have, I think this is probably my biggest issue with the comic.
Your issue with the issues?
My issue with these issues, and specifically the last issue, I did find that as we were talking near the beginning, the different endings, or the different endings that we're given, and we're kind of getting having it both ways, where you have revenge is, so to context it, they capture Krem, Supergirl, Ruthie releases this story that actually probably was closer to when it happened.
Yeah.
So I just realized this. We were talking about how the story might have been unreliable because it was like 300, possibly up to 300 years after. I think the story must have come out quite soon after the events because that story is what tells everyone that Supergirl killed Krem. So that, and that's what gets the brigands to chase Supergirl for revenge instead of Ruthie. So by that logic, that must have come out close to that time.
And they have a conversation about it, don't they?
Exactly. I did feel the ending was a bit too convoluted because then Krem is in the Phantom Zone for 300 years, becomes repentant, begs for forgiveness, and then Ruthie kills him right at the end in the exact same spot where he killed her dad 300 years ago.
Did you have to read that twice? Because
I had to read it twice.
Yeah.
So in reading it twice, I felt, again, it's a bit too convoluted because it mixed metaphors about revenge and what the point is. And that's why I feel like they were trying to have it both ways by having this revenge isn't good aspect. And also, but he fucking murders her at the end. And that feels good, doesn't it? Like,
it made me really dislike Ruthie's character.
Well, I think I didn't mind that it was so far later because it was just a different character as with age, with 300 years of age.
Yeah.
So I didn't mind that she'd had a change of heart in that regard. But in the writing, I didn't feel it didn't affect my view of the character, but it affected my view of the writing because it was like, well, what was the point in all this?
Well, it just, I mean, I don't know if it's just my opinions on the criminal justice system that I won't get into. But I kind of felt...
That's a different podcast.
Yeah, fucking A. That's another 2-hour episode in and of itself. It's the fact that they went to all the effort to imprison him and for him to reform and to repent and to, learn the names of all the people that he killed and to really interface with what he did, only to murder him in cold blood. Because it implies that actually he grew over the intervening 300 years. Ruthie did not.
Well, she grew in a different way because she could not physically kill him 300 years ago and now barely gave a second thought. So she's grown in a different way. I think there's an element of, again, this is why I find it conflicting. There's an element of, well, when 300 years ago, when the story originally took place, he didn't care if he was killed. He wasn't that bothered. So there's an element of like an almost a even more harsher revenge where it's not I'm killing you despite you not giving a shit, and then years later when it's you are now repentant, you've just been released from a 300-year prison, you're begging me for forgiveness, and now I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a more indulgent revenge.
Power, isn't it?
And it feels so conflicting to the trope-ridden, we've killed all the henchmen, but don't kill the bad guy because you're better than that. And then let's put him in jail for 300 years and then kill him. Like,
I
think it missed the mark.
It leaves a sour taste in my mouth.
Yeah. I like the art in the end, on the hill with the sunset again.
With the with them in shadow on the hill. And we get to see a matured Supergirl, and I think they did an amazing job of drawing her.
Yep, that was good.
She looked great. But the ending left a real sour taste in my mouth, and I'm not... Again, did we both read this today?
I read the last issue today, yeah.
Yeah, I read the last issue earlier on today. So I'm not really fully sure how I feel about it yet. I might need to, reflect on it.
And one tiny little thing, that there was a point where, and this I got this from second or third reading as well. Supergirl says to Ruthie, you made sure, she's saying you told everyone that I killed him, you set the people after me so that you didn't have to deal with them, like things that Supergirl requested of her.
Yeah.
And then she says, you made sure he'd stay locked up.
Yeah.
But then Supergirl had the Phantom Zone thing that he was trapped in.
Yeah.
So that was confusing to me.
Yeah, it didn't make any sense.
Who's got him locked up? I think something must happen in this last issue. There was like, hang on, we've got a course correct, and I don't know what happened, but something was lost in this last issue, which was a shame because overall, I really enjoyed the whole comic. I thought the writing was refreshing for a superhero title, and I'm excited to read more Tom King, despite the issues with the last issue.
Yeah, well, I think it just... Yeah, the last 2 issues were the weakest for me. The last 2 issues are the weakest, but the things that in general I really liked about it is that I got a real sense of the journey they'd been on and that they were on a journey. Although one more thing that did bother me now that I think of it is that Ruthie had a really bad sense of how long it had all taken. She would often say, "Oh, in the past weeks that we'd been traveling," and then it was months, and then it was weeks again, and then it was days. She never really had a strong sense of how long the journey had been, which was a bit confusing to follow.
Yeah, that's fair enough. But overall, would you read another Tom King series based on your experience with this?
Yeah, probably. I definitely want to read more Supergirl. I like Supergirl a lot.
I think, this made me a lot more of a fan of Supergirl.
Well, there is a Supergirl run that I read a few years ago that neither of us could find that I really, really enjoyed.
That'll be your Moby Dick from now on, is finding that
My
title.
White Whale.
Yes. But one thing I have with titles like these, with a lot of Tom King ones, but also other other writers, is you'll read a run by a writer and you'll go, "Oh, I love this character and this portrayal," and then you read the next one by a different writer, you go,
terrible.
"Oh, it was the writing I liked, not the character." So what I'm saying is I still like Supergirl as a character. I think they've done interesting things with her before this, and that's really good for a character. But there's every chance that the next Supergirl one could come out and we'll go, "Oh, let's read this one based on how we enjoyed this one," and then it's like the same old thing again.
And now that I think of it, in my head I might have gotten a Captain Marvel comic mixed up with a Supergirl one.
That's possible. They are both blonde.
They're both blonde. They both wear blue outfits. They're both basically Kryptonians.
In a sense, yeah. That's close enough, yeah.
It's all the same shit, innit?
But yeah, I think we've covered everything.
So thank you so much for listening. You can email us at comicliterate@gmail.com.
Amazing work. Fantastic.
I'll
get it tattooed on my forehead as well.
Yeah, I'm not going to plug all the things we do this week. I'm just not feeling in a very pluggy mood.
Do you want me to plug one little thing?
Oh, go on.
This will be out 2 months afterwards, but we've got our first short out. So
oh yeah, no, you did that. Yeah, let's plug that. There's a YouTube short.
Yep, there's a short, and it's just a little bit of a clip. So if you're already listening to the podcast, then it doesn't really matter to you. But if you do want what we think are some of the funnier little smaller clips, then that's going to be there with a bit of background animation, that kind of thing. So find those wherever you can on YouTube Shorts and TikTok.
Yeah, just have a look at it for our sake.
Yes, do
it for us.
Like, share, and subscribe. That's what we have to keep. That's what we have to keep saying from now on.
Yeah,
and also now that the podcast actually on the websites now and they're on the aggregates, review them 5 stars if you can.
We're available anywhere you find your podcasts. I mean, you don't need to tell it. We don't need to tell you that because you found this one.
Exactly.
But leave a review. You get a shout out on the podcast if you mention Alan Moore in your review.
Yeah. Or if you do review it 5 stars, and if you can caption it or screenshot it and just send us a thing, then with a message, we'll more than happily read it out.
Yeah, 100%.
If you send out a request, we'll probably do that as well. So
yeah, 100%. Like
we can't film or anything, but just take our word that we did whatever the request was.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, we're up for it. We're up for it.
All right.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one, wherever we do.
Bye.
Goodbye.